I do want to say before I get into things that this video will have spoilers, so yeah, just a fair warning. Golden Wind, the 5th part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The main thing that I want to point out with this part is its cast of characters, and mainly the main group that we stick with throughout the story, that being Narancia, Bucciolati, Giorno, Mista, Abbacchio, and kinda Fugo, and then later Trish. One of my favorites was Narancia. He's kind of that airheaded character that, you see in some stories, and he's a pretty funny character too. I didn't expect to like him as much as I did, but he was just such a funny character to see in this part. And really, I could say the same thing for a few other characters like Mista. But to take a step back from that, I do want to talk about how the backstories were handled. I feel that Araki really did a great job on most of the backstories in this part. When you look at Narancia, his backstory, loyalty is a very big part of his character. And that's because, he was betrayed by his friend, or someone who he thought was a friend. But later, he got saved by Bucciolati and his group, and he placed 100% of his trust and his loyalty into Bucciolati. And I felt with this part that the backstories of most of the characters were handled pretty well. They held a lot more meaning to the characters, making the main cast a team of gangsters and then making it their goal to rise up in the ranks and then try and find their boss. It was also a very different thing from what we've seen with the other parts, because with all the other main characters and stuff, they were almost always objectively on the good side of things. They were the heroes. So, putting the main character Giorno, turning him into a gangster and having him being involved in a criminal organization, they added a little bit of moral ambiguity. And really, it just makes Giorno's backstory, his past, a very big part of his character and why he joined a gang in the first place. It's because when he was a little kid, his mom neglected him and his stepfather abused him, and he was really heading down a dark path. He probably would have grown up to be a very twisted person. It's very funny that a gangster he met and helped out a little bit showed him more humanity and treated him better than his parents did. That's just something I love to see, although it's pretty bad for Giorno to have bad parents. But just his motivations for, joining a gang and being led down the right path by a gangster of all things. It's something that I really liked with Giorno's character in this part. Now, on the topic of Giorno, he is the son of Dio. I found it very funny that although Dio is one of the most evil characters in JoJo's, his son Giorno inherited the good heart and really just the good spirit that each of the Joestars have. And in a way, Giorno is also kind of a Joestar. Dio had the body of Jonathan Joestar when he had Giorno, and that was just a little detail I thought was cool. There was even a moment near the beginning of this part where Koichi, he was kind of introducing us to part 5 and some of the characters, and Koichi said that Giorno inherited the virtue of justice from the Joestar bloodline. And after reading part 5, I would definitely have to agree with him. Giorno, I saw that he was a pretty calm person, but he was also very ambitious. There are some moments where Giorno says that he has a dream, and I don't think he ever really states what his dream is, but it seems he's already resolved himself at the beginning of this part to, follow that dream. And he does whatever it takes. I do want to go back to Dio real quick. When you look at Dio, how he grew up, the situation he grew up in, before he met the Joestar family, he turned out to be a very evil person. But when you look at Giorno, he also had some very terrible, living conditions with his mom and stepfather. They were pretty bad parents to him. And he was also put in a tough situation. Even with all that, he grew up to be a much greater person than Dio ever was. Even if he's Dio's son, he didn't turn out like Dio did. One of my favorite characters in this part, besides Narancia and Giorno, is Bucciolati. He's pretty much the leader of, our main cast of characters. With Bucciolati, he always follows what he believes to be right. That's such a big theme with this character, and really a big theme in this part. Even if he's involved in a criminal organization, he still does what he believes to be right, and that's something that I really loved about him. He also plays a very big part in my favorite moment in Golden Wind, which is his final moments in the story. Bucciolati tells Giorno that when they first met in Napoli, when they betrayed the gang, his heart was slowly dying, but it was because he met Giorno that he came back to life. That is just some very beautiful writing that I saw in this part, and with that, there's a bit of irony, because Giorno's stand ability is that he's able to give things life. But with what Bucciolati says, it's not just a part of Giorno's ability to give things life, it's also a part of his nature. Although Bucciolati was the main leader of his group before Giorno ever joined the gang, Giorno became a leader in Bucciolati's group. And just like Bucciolati, Giorno pushed a lot of the characters forward and was a source of inspiration for all of them. Abbacchio. He used to be a cop and a very righteous person, but he ran into events that made him feel like he was rejected by society and even his country. He became disillusioned with being a policeman and doing what's right. The only way he felt calm was being with Bucciolati and taking orders. I felt that Abbacchio had a very strong narrative in the story. I loved how at the end of Abbacchio's journey, he eventually learns that there is meaning in seeking out the truth in things. Abbacchio found that even if the stuff you are doing seems meaningless, there is an importance to it. I just love the message that we get with Abbacchio and really just his whole character arc throughout the story. He was without a doubt a very impactful character. Now, someone who I was kinda disappointed with was Fugo. In the first half of the story, he wasn't really an interesting character, but when we saw him leave Bucciolati's group after they turned into traitors, I thought his character was going to go somewhere. I thought he was gonna come back into the story, and whether he was an ally or an enemy to Bucciolati, whatever the case, I knew Araki could have handled Fugo in such a great and entertaining way, and could have twisted his character into something super interesting. But again, I was met with disappointment with Fugo, because after he leaves Bucciolati's group, he just never comes back into the story again. If Araki felt that Fugo just wasn't needed in the story anymore, then I would have to agree with him. But I do believe he could have become such an interesting character if Araki brought him back into part 5. But with what we see of him, he really isn't that interesting to me. Diavolo, the main antagonist of Golden Wind. I didn't like Diavolo and Doppio all that much. I mean, giving Doppio and Diavolo multiple personality disorder, I thought that was a pretty cool twist, and you know, it's not something I've ever seen with an antagonist before. But aside from that, there wasn't really any time or anything that Diavolo did that just made me think he was a great antagonist. He was very obsessed with making sure that people didn't find out his identity, find out his true nature, and because of that, he showed no mercy to people who tried to investigate him, and he tried to erase everything about his past. I saw that his motivations were pretty strong, but yeah, with Diavolo, nothing really caught my eye with him. I did love seeing my boy Polnareff though, back in the story. He wasn't in the best shape, but you know, at least we got to see him again. One of the last things I want to talk about isn't really necessarily focused on part 5, but JoJo's as a whole, and that is Araki killing off characters. He's done it in every part of JoJo's, at least so far, and it's something that I've really appreciated with Araki and JoJo's as I've been reading through each part. Now, to me, death doesn't automatically make a story good, and it doesn't automatically show that a story has good writing, but it can push a story to incredible heights if it's done right, and Araki makes death so meaningful in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In part 5, Araki does kill off a few characters, and what it does is this pushes the other characters forward and gives them an unbreakable resolve if they didn't already have one. And whenever a character does die, Araki usually tries to leave a message with the said character. And like I said, that not only makes it meaningful, but also just, to me, it's good writing. That's another thing I noticed near the end of part 5, is that Araki became super poetic poetic with the way he just wrote his story. And that's the type of writing I love to read, and probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed this part of JoJo's so much. The last thing I want to talk about with Golden Wind is the art. I think I'm gonna start doing this from here on out, and that is comparing one page from the first chapter and one page from the last chapter. When I did this with Diamond is Unbreakable, I saw a huge change in the art style and how the characters were drawn. But with Golden Wind, if I'm being honest, I don't really see too much of a difference between, the first chapter and the last chapter. But there is a difference. For me, it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is. Overall, I would say that Araki's art style improved throughout part 5. Although, it was little by little and very, subtle and stuff. It wasn't as drastic as Diamond is Unbreakable, but improvement is still improvement. The next part I'll be reading is part 6, Stone Ocean with Jolene. I can't wait. I would also just like to know, what's your favorite moment out of part 5? Because I know mine, it's with Bucciolati in his final moments, and I just want to hear what all of you guys have to say. Anyways though, thanks for watching, see you in the next one, and peace.
What else should I